Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Echo Live. My name is Paulette, and I am the staff astronomer here at the Michigan Science Center. Today, we're going to be talking about our fall nighttime sky. So, before we get started, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat feature. If you are new to Echo Live, welcome. And if you are one of our old friends who's been watching us all along, welcome back. The chat feature in Facebook, Zoom, and YouTube is how I answer questions during our program today. So feel free to introduce yourself in chat. And if during the program you have questions or you want to answer any of the questions that I ask, then go ahead and ask those in the chat feature. So today we're going to be talking about the fall nighttime sky. We're going to be taking a look at some of the constellations and star pictures that we see up in that nighttime sky. So we're going to go ahead and switch on over to our virtual planetarium. So our virtual planetarium, again, is a software that we call Stellarium. Stellarium is free and open source to the public. You can check it out on Stellarium, or just Googling Stellarium, and you're able to find that software. Now, I know a lot about Stellarium and what we can find up in the nighttime sky. So let's go ahead and use our software to be able to take a look. So here we have our nighttime sky, and I've put up our cardinal directions so we know what direction we're facing. You might also notice that I've set our sky to about 7:30 or so, and we're taking a look at the nighttime sky and where our star pictures or constellations can be found. If we look right down over here, we're going to see what we call the Big Dipper. And when we draw lines between the stars of the Big Dipper, we see something that looks kind of like that. Now, the Big Dipper is actually part of a larger constellation or star picture called Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. If we take these two stars in the bowl of the Dipper and we draw a line through them up, we get to this star right here called Polaris. Polaris is our north star, and it's part of the Little Dipper, which we have right there. Now, the Big and Little Dippers are actually part of the larger star pictures, and we were able to see that with Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. The Little Dipper is also part of our constellation Ursa Minor, or the Little Bear. Now, we've talked about these constellations on Echo Live in the past, but today I wanted to reintroduce you to Ursa Major and Ursa Minor in our northern sky, because they can actually help us find another constellation or star picture. If we draw a line through these two stars right here in the bowl of the Dipper, past Polaris, and we keep going, we get to these 5 bright stars right over here. And when we draw lines between these stars, we see that shape right there. Now tell me, what does this look like to you? What does this shape look like when you take a look at it up in the nighttime sky? Again, if you have an answer to any of the questions that I'm asking, you can go ahead and put those in our chat feature. But what does this look like? If we use our imaginations to see a picture in the sky, what do we think that picture might be? Some people think it kind of looks like an M. or a W, or an E, or a 3. It could be a lightning bolt. But the ancient Greeks looked up in the sky and they saw something that looked like this. This is a constellation called Queen Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia was a queen in Ethiopia a long time ago, and she is in the nighttime sky sitting in her throne. Nathan says it kind of looks like a bird. It definitely looks like a bird. I don't really think it looks much like a queen sitting in her throne, but that's what they were able to see. So Queen Cassiopeia was in her throne, and you might notice something about this constellation. If we take a close-up look at this constellation, you'll see that Queen Cassiopeia is looking at herself. She has a mirror, and she's actually being forced to look at herself up in the nighttime sky, and that's because she was the most beautiful person ever. Or at least that's what she would say if you asked her. She thought that she was more beautiful than all the gods and goddesses. Well, that kind of upset the gods and goddesses. So Poseidon, the king of the sea, sent a sea monster to attack and destroy the kingdom. Well, not wanting this to happen, the king, who also happens to be up in the nighttime sky, decided, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to the oracle. The oracle is the all-knowing being, knows everything in the universe. So I'm going to ask the oracle how I stop this sea monster. The oracle turned to Cephas the king and said, well, if you want to stop Cetus the sea monster, you could sacrifice your daughter, Andromeda. Well, King Cephas and Queen Cassiopeia were really good at their jobs. It was a really good king, and Cassiopeia was a really good queen. But questionable parents. So they said, okay, and they tied Andromeda the princess out to the rocks. So they sacrificed their daughter Andromeda. Now, just as Cetus the sea monster was coming in to attack and eat Andromeda, our friend Perseus, who just happened to be flying through with the head of Medusa and wearing our boots of Hermes, turned Cetus the sea monster into stone. So Cetus the sea monster was turned into stone and made a very nice statue in the middle of the kingdom, and Andromeda, Perseus, Cephas, and Cassiopeia were able to live happily ever after. So one of my favorite things about constellations is the fact that there's a lot of stories that go along with them. And this is just one of the many stories that we're able to see. These are some of my favorite constellations because they make up a very large story up in the sky. Also, one of my favorite stories and constellations because we can actually see something really cool in this part of the sky. If we look right over here, we're going to be able to see my favorite object. And I know I say this every time we take a look, but this is the Andromeda Galaxy. It's a group of about 1 trillion stars, and these stars are 2.6 million light years away from us. 2.6 Yeah, a million light years away from us. These are so far away that the galaxy itself just looks like a fuzzy blob up in the nighttime sky. But that fuzzy blob is really important because that fuzzy blob of light that we're able to see was allowed us to explore more about our own galaxy that we live inside of. So Cassiopeia, Cephas the king, Andromeda the princess, and Perseus the hero are all constellations in our fall sky. So it is officially fall and has been for a couple of weeks now. Basically since September 22nd, it has been fall. So we've been able to see these fall constellations for a little while now, but some of them are kind of hard to spot up in the nighttime sky. Now, Andromeda the princess is actually a pretty easy constellation to find. If we look over here in our eastern sky, we're going to be able to see, let's see. We're going to be able to see right up over here. There we go. We're able to see 4 bright stars. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. What do we get when we draw lines between 4 stars? What shape do we get when we take a look up in this part of the sky? We call this the Great Square, also sometimes known as the Great Square of Pegasus. So when we look up in this part of the sky, we're actually able to see a constellation of Pegasus, the flying horse, if we really use our imaginations. Let's just have Pegasus up there. Whoops. So we have our Great Square of Pegasus, but I sometimes like to think of this as a baseball diamond. Baseball diamond in the sky. We have home base right here. First, second, and third. And in the outfield, we have the All-Stars. Mwah, mwah, mwah. It's one of my favorite jokes up in the nighttime sky, but it's also pretty terrible. So we have the Great Square of Pegasus up in our sky right here. And Pegasus was a flying horse in Greek and Roman mythology, but we can only really see the front half of the horse flying across the sky, and that's why it looks a little bit funny. Now, we really want to take a look at some of the things that we can see up in the nighttime sky that are not our constellations. Now, we did talk a little bit about when we were talking about our summer constellations. We had our summer triangle. So here we have Cygnus the swan. Cygnus the swan here, Aquila the eagle here, and Lyra the harp right up over here. So we have our summer triangle still up in the sky. Why do you think we can still see our summer constellations? It's not summer. It's been fall for quite a while. But because the Earth is actually turning, and the Earth is pointing at different constellations during different times of the year, just like the seasons don't change instantaneously from winter to spring to summer to fall, we ease through the constellations as well. So we're able to see many of our summer constellations well into the fall. We're actually starting to be able to see some of our winter constellations as well. But the things I really wanted to show you up in the nighttime sky right now are actually over in our south-southwest. So if we look at our sky right here, along with stars and constellations, what else are we able to see? And we've talked about this during Echo Live before. What are some of the other things that we're able to see up in the sky? Well, we're also able to see planets. And right now, we're actually able to see 3 really, really bright planets. If we look right here in the constellation of Sagittarius, we're going to have one of the brighter planets that we're able to see. What do you think? What planet do you think we're taking a look at? It's one of the brighter planets. It's not the brightest planet. What do you think? What might we be taking a look at up in the nighttime sky? I'll give you one more hint. It's the largest planet in the solar system. That's right, we have the planet Jupiter. So we're able to see Jupiter up in our sky right now. And we've talked about Jupiter before. Jupiter is an amazing sight to see. We're able to see Jupiter with a telescope or a small pair of binoculars. So this is about what it would look like if you're taking a look at it with a pair of binoculars. And when you are taking a look at it, what else do you see? When you take a look at Jupiter, what else do you see when you're looking at it through a pair of binoculars, which is what our viewpoint is right here? We see some other dots. I wonder what those dots could be. Does anybody know? What are those other dots that we see when we're taking a look at Jupiter? They're probably not planets, or they're probably not stars, because these dots actually move. So sometimes they'll be in different positions. They're probably not other planets because they're very, very close to Jupiter. You have it. They're moons. These are 4 of our moons of Jupiter. There are 4 moons that are visible with a small pair of binoculars. They were discovered in the 1600s by Galileo Galilei. He discovered these moons and was able to talk about how they're actually moons, similar to the moon that we see up in our nighttime sky. So it's Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. These are our 4 Galilean moons, but Jupiter has more than 4 moons. It has more than a dozen moons. It has more than 50 moons. Jupiter is all the way up to 79 moons, and that is crazy. Now, if you do have a small telescope, you can take a look at Jupiter, of course, much, much closer. Jupiter is a gas giant made mostly out of hydrogen and helium, and it has these stripes that we think about on the surface. But let's see if we can take a closer look at some of these moons. When we zoom on in here, we have the moon. Let's see, this one is, I believe, Callisto. And it's a pretty rocky moon. Kind of looks a lot like our moon up in the nighttime sky. We also have right over here, this one is Io. I love Io. Io, to me, kind of looks like a pizza. It's so close to Jupiter that it's actually volcanically active, which I think is super, super cool. So we had Callisto and Io, and here we have Europa. Europa is a really cool moon because underneath the surface is probably ice, made mostly out of ice, but there's underneath that some water and some other really interesting and weird things. Europa is one of those places that we actually want to send spacecraft to learn a little bit more about, because it's one of the places in our solar system that could harbor life. And I think that's pretty cool. If we look up in our sky right down over here, we have our last Galilean moon. This one is Ganymede. So we have Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. Again, those are visible with a pair of binoculars. And if you're interested in the program Stellarium, you can actually take a look at where these moons are and then know which one you're looking at. Now, we have a couple of other planets up in our sky as well. And the next planet is very close to Jupiter, but it's not quite as bright. It's still pretty bright up in the sky, but it's not super bright, but it's visible, even from downtown Detroit with all the city lights we have around us. This moon, or this planet, is visible. Which one do you think it is? Do we have, oh, I don't know. Which one do we think it might be? Here, let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit and get a hint. Because this planet looks a little funky. Now, Jupiter looks like, in a pair of binoculars, it looks like a floating sphere or floating ball out in space. And Evan, Venus is a really, really great gas, but it's dimmer than Jupiter, and Venus is actually the brightest. Nathan, that's right. We're zooming in on Saturn. Now this one, like I said, looks a little bit funny with a pair of binoculars because it's got rings. Saturn's, of course, not the only planet with rings. Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune all have rings as well, but Saturn's are the biggest and the brightest, so they're the ones that we think of when we think of rings. Saturn is actually kind of shaped like a floating football out in space. Now you can see a lot of Saturn's moons orbiting around it as well. Saturn has a lot of moons as well. It's over 80 moons. So pretty crazy amount. And with Stellarium, like I said, you can continue to zoom in on some of these moons, although these might be just a little too far away to be able to tell what they are. Let me double check here. Yep, these are just a little bit too far away, so we're not able to see what these moons are, but you can definitely, there's things that you can look up online to see where all of those moons are sort of located. So really fun thing to be able to take a look at up in the nighttime sky. And we have one more planet. One more planet, and this one is also pretty bright right now. It's not always bright when you look at it. And it's right up over here. Nathan, yes, exactly. Saturn has 82 moons. I usually just say over X amount, mostly because we discover new moons all the time and I can't keep up anymore. It's crazy. So here we have another planet. Which one is this? This one looks a little funny. It's Mars, that's right. This one is a red color. So we're actually able to see red Mars up in the real nighttime sky. And it's, like I said, really, really bright right now. So we're actually in our orbit close to Mars. So if we have the sun in the center, and we have the Earth orbiting around, and we have Mars orbiting around, we're on the same side of the sun as Mars right now. So it's actually going to appear really super bright up in our nighttime sky. So let's go ahead and zoom on in and take a look at the red planet. Oh, we have a very clear view of our red planet. It has two moons, Phobos and Deimos. Yep. And it also has the largest volcano in the solar system, Olympus Mons, has polar ice caps. Under the southern polar ice cap, they've discovered water, and it has a huge canyon on the surface that would stretch all the way from the east coast of the United States to the west coast, and it's over 4 miles deep at its deepest point. Now, some of you might remember, if you've been watching Echo Live with us, that there is a spacecraft on its way to Mars, Perseverance. So Perseverance is on its way to Mars, and it just passed its halfway point. So we'll be able to see Perseverance in just a little bit. Now, one more thing that I want to talk to you guys about is some other things that we might not be able to see up in our nighttime sky with the unaided eye, but it's something that we can take a look at with a telescope, like a powerful telescope. Between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, we have something called the asteroid belt. Now, we did something really cool the other day. We actually landed a spacecraft on an asteroid. And not only did we land that spacecraft on an asteroid, it took a piece of the asteroid with it. That's on its way back to the Earth. And that is super fun and exciting because we're actually going to be able to see a sample up close on the Earth of an asteroid in our asteroid belt. So we're doing some pretty amazing things in science right now, especially in space exploration. So I encourage you to go outside and try and find some of these fall constellations that we have up in our sky. And pretty soon we're going to start to see our winter constellations making their way up above the horizon. So if we move forward in time just a little bit, we're going to start to be able to see those winter constellations. And the reason I'm moving forward in time is because I'm going to show you some of my favorite constellations. And for those of you that have been watching with us since the beginning, I apologize. So we're going to take a look right here at two of our constellations. We have Canis Major, the big dog, with the bright star Sirius, and Canis Minor right here with the bright star Procyon. So Canis Major and Canis Minor are making their way above the horizon. And part of the reason that I pointed out Canis Major and Canis Minor, we're getting a new movie here at the Science Center. We're getting a movie called Super Power Dogs. And it's all about dogs and their superpowers, how they can sniff out people from avalanches and from fallen buildings, and how they're emotional support animals who make people feel better. So that movie is in our IMAX theater, and it is all about those. That movie is actually launching this weekend, thanks to some support by Strategic Staffing Solutions. And you'll be able to see it here at the Science Center. We do have a free day on Saturday, so you can check it out then. But this movie will be playing at the Science Center for the next couple of months. So even if you're not able to make it this weekend, you can definitely come in the future and take a look at our and watch our new IMAX film, Superpower Dogs. It's so much fun. I love the film. And actually, this weekend, we're having a pet adoption on Saturday. So you can meet a new dog and take it home with you. You also might be able to meet my dog, Regina. She's going to be at the Science Center this weekend as well to say hi to all of her fans and to here for the launch of the movie. So we're super, super excited about that. Now, I want to thank everybody so much for joining us here for Echo Live today. Of course, our programs are brought to you by DENSO and for the Ford Motor Company. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. I'd be happy to answer them. Go outside, try and find some of the constellations that we talked about today. Remember, we have our constellations in the northern part of our sky with Cassiopeia, Cephas the king, Andromeda the princess, and Perseus the hero. And then you can try and find some of those planets in the southern sky because they're definitely there and they're very bright up in our sky right now. Not seeing any questions coming in on the chat. I also want to remind you that we have Echo Live Wednesdays at 2:30 Eastern. So next week it'll be Anna. She'll be back to say hello. And I want to thank everybody again for joining us today. And well, I guess we will see you next time. Thanks so much for joining us.